We are back. College basketball starts in a couple weeks. I've got my guy Gavin here. We are starting with the Pac-12. Welcome to the Run Pure Sports College Basketball Preview Show. Starting with the Pac-12 today, I guess you could say, you could either say getting the worst out of the way first, or we chose Pac-12 because Gavin's on the West Coast. We're going to need to understand these teams' DNA so we can fire at those late night Saturday slates. One of my favorite things about the college basketball season, those 4+ late Saturdays in the winter. What's going on, Gav?
What's going on, man? Yeah, 29 days away. I think we're starting off with the Pac-12 for both of those reasons. If not for the fact that there's, 5 or 6 real frontline guys in this conference, you might almost mistake it for the Big West. So there's going to be some really, really bad bruises on this conference in terms of when we run down some teams. And we'll see if anybody can challenge UCLA. It's kind of a one team and who the hell else knows, but let's dive in and see what we got.
Yeah, I think there are a couple interesting storylines before we go team by team. We've got Tommy Lloyd's year 2 at Arizona. Team loses a lot. We'll be starting off with them. Like you said, the conference overall looks to be pretty weak. Not many All-American candidates coming out of this conference. It was actually, I was struggling to find like a 5th guy to put on the all-conference team. We've got UCLA, maybe like a flop lag spot after they were the media darling coming into last season. They bring in 2 5-star freshmen to mix with their I'd say Tiger Campbell and Jaquez probably both first-team guys. And then we've got Southern Cal moving forward without the Mobley brothers. It's going to be a different-looking team for sure. Any quick thoughts on the storylines there?
Yeah, Tommy Lloyd's going to have his work cut out for him this year. Objectively, one of the 5 best coaching jobs last year. That also came with losing 3 players in the first 33 picks of the draft. So, yeah, USC's been a team that, even as an alum, I felt they've overplayed their talent a lot the past couple of years. A lot of that having to do with the Mobley brothers, but much different looking team with being probably guard centric this year and a couple young frosh. And Jaquez and Tiger, they've been first team all Pac-12 for 9 years already. So why not make them first team for the 10th?
Yeah. So we'll just get it started here. We'll go alphabetical order so we don't piss anyone off as far as who we think is going to be the best. So we'll start with Arizona. Awesome team last year. We both kind of rode them the entire year, especially in daily fantasy. They finished 33-4, 5th at KenPom, 18-2 in conference. They lose Benny Mathurin, Christian Coloco, Dalen Terry, Justin Keir. But they've got a lot coming in. What do you think about the additions that they made, both through the transfer portal and the freshmen coming in?
Yeah, the freshman's kind of easy. I think this Kylan Boswell. I always worry about reclass freshman point guards. Maybe Askew has skewed my mindset just for that reason.
How does he not?
Certainly didn't help that. He's not really a point guard, but these kind of reclass guys, you definitely wonder a little bit. Dylan Anderson's supposed to be a pretty formidable 4-star center. I'm not going to be able to touch on much of these freshmen until we see him a couple games in. But bring in Courtney Ramey, 5th-year senior from Texas. Stats should take a major uptick given pace increase and kind of offensive scheme change from the slowest team in the country in Texas to one of the fastest in Zona. It's kind of weird that his big rub with Texas last year was all about role and kind of the logjam with him, Andrew Jones, and Marcus Carr in the backcourt. And now he's coming in as probably, the third option at best, scoring-wise, in the pecking order behind Tubelis and Kerr. So we'll see how he kind of accepts that role. But, at least a guy who I think provides a good, consistent level of play versus someone like a Tubelis and a Kerr, who are the 2 holdovers from last year's team, but we're also the 2 most inconsistent pieces from last year's team. And the main kind of fate of the team hinges upon whether they can produce night in and night out. Obviously, staying healthy is going to be a component of it. They both battled injuries at different part of the year. But you could definitely see Arizona, right back in the top 25 if they're both kind of front of the line conference type players. Cedric Henderson from Campbell, he's more going to be a guy off the bench, but unless one of the Frost take a really big unexpected jump, I expect him to be kind of probably the sixth or seventh man, depending on rotation. So we'll see. They're bringing a couple interesting guys, and we know we got from Tubelis Kerr, and then we have Umar Ballo potentially making the step up. He's a really interesting piece that's getting kind of a lot of early pub, and kind of reminds me a little bit of a younger Sonogo in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so we saw Ballo play really well off the bench last year, averaged just over 15 minutes a game. I think he's a guy DFS-wise that we'll be looking at early, especially, I think he slots right into the starting five. And, if his minutes tick up into the low 20s, he was over 1 fantasy point per minute last year off the bench. I think he's going to be super interesting right from the jump there. But yeah, I agree. I think that you had said earlier that this team is going to be a lot more volatile than they were last year, just because of Tube and Kirk Kriisa being that kind of player. I think it's on Kriisa's back here, the team, and then Tube has got to play like an All-American or at least an All-Conference guy for them to stick in the top 20. Bart Torvik's got them 14th to begin the season. I think that's a touch high, personally. Just looking at their starting five, and the depth isn't going to be as good as it was last year either. There are some people who have Pelle Larsson on their all-conference teams. I think that that might have more to do with the weakness of the conference than faith in him. It's tough for me to see him getting there just as kind of a shooter only guy. What do you think about him? And then final thoughts on Arizona overall.
Yeah, he had some great efficiency numbers and kind of 20-ish, minutes a game last year. That being said, what was the highest scoring option he ever was on the floor? The fourth man, like to put the ball up on the floor, so yeah, when you got to cover Mathurin, Tube, even kind of Dalen Terry came on late in the year, and yeah, he's going to be wide open. It took a lot of, low difficulty 3-pointers. So, we'll see. Goodman's got the knee pads out for him. I don't know. I don't really see it. I think he's at best, the fifth man and probably the sixth man.
Yeah, I don't agree with the all-conference look. I mean, like you said, probably the fourth option on his own team. So, yeah, I think Arizona's going to be good again, but I don't see the ceiling that they had last year. And like we said, they're going to be volatile, but pieces that we're going to be able to play in DFS for sure, specifically Ballo, if he starts the year cheap.
Yeah, I think the other thing is I think this Arizona is the biggest discrepancy from quality of offense to quality of defense in terms of, in addition to that pace, they're going to put up a lot of points. They got a couple guys that can, put it in spurts at different times on the floor, but you got major pieces to worry about on the defensive end. No Mathurin, Tube and Kerr are liabilities. Ballo is much slower footed than Koloko, and Dalen Terry was, pretty much drafted in the first round for his defense. So,
he was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to look much different on the defensive end. I think this year is where they're going to struggle. So yeah, definitely look at them, I think, early for overs and for DFS.
Yeah. I mean, the tempo 9th last year, I think that holds. And I think you're right. I think they come back down a bit defensively. So a spot to target for DFS for sure. Speaking of a team that we have targeted in certain spots the last couple of years, coach is in trouble here. Arizona State go 14-17 last year, end up 97th at KenPom, 10-10 in conference. Torvik's got them 50th though to start the year. Gavin, what do you think overall about Arizona State and who they brought in? Because he hit the portal hard here.
Yeah, Bobby Hurley must have felt the fire finally. You bring in both Cambridge brothers, Desmond from Nevada, Devin from Auburn. Frankie Collins was the backup point guard at Michigan last year. Warren Washington was a stud center 7-footer in Nevada with great foot speed. And then you got the leading scorer from last year, DJ Horn, who may not even start depending on kind of what this lineup looks like. I think it's the most interesting team in the conference for sure. God forbid if Marcus Bagley can stay healthy, for an entire season. I think this team has ceiling to be the second best team in the conference if Bagley can stay healthy for most, if not all, the season. I mean, all the pieces are there, and it's a team that, the thing about Bobby Hurley, I always kind of attached him to offense, right? But he's had one top 50 offense in the last 7 seasons, so he's been able to coach up the defense more than we think. And with a lot of the guys on the roster, I don't really worry about much of the offense. I think the offense more or less comes itself.
Yeah, this
But
team's going to
it's
score.
going to be much more of a, work in progress, I think, in terms of Hurley needing to get his hands all over it.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think this team takes a jump offensively. They were 294th in Ken Palm's adjusted offensive efficiency last year. Bringing in Desmond Cambridge, I think, is just massive. He was kind of the second guy to Sherfield there at Nevada. I think the Collins pickup is awesome. We saw him play really well in the tournament. You remember he started due to the injury. So I think that's a great pickup. And like you said, this roster kind of fits together well. I think, the potential pitfalls, like you said, Horn being the leading scorer last year, is he going to be fine with being, like the fifth option on this team, or, is that going to cause some chemistry concerns? So yeah, I mean, I like the makeup of the starting 5 at least. Obviously, it looks a lot better if Bagley's healthy. I think that's the key. Glad that you think that this team has ceiling, because when I was looking at them, I was like, man, especially in this conference, if I had to pick a team that is kind of like the sleeper of the conference, I think it would be Arizona State.
I think the team centers around, Bagley's health, around kind of the chemistry and fit, and a lot of these guys. And it might be DJ Horn who plays shooting guard, and Cambridge has to start off the bench, a guy who, was a 16-point scorer in Nevada a year ago. So yeah, they got enough here for sure. They're not losing really a ton from the team from last year. Heath, Marion Jackson wasn't really what we thought he was going to be, stepping up in competition. So yeah, we'll see. I really like this team. I think going into the year, these are one of the teams in the Pac-12 that feels like they've just been snake bit to shit the last 2 years. Like, and Bagley obviously being at the center of that, whether injuries or remember the year when Remy's last year when they were, like the sexy top 10, top 15 team, and they just bombed to a different level. So I think we see a much different trajectory of the team this year.
Yeah. So last thing on Arizona State. So we've seen them kind of turn into a team that's been anchored by their defense. Do you think Hurley flips that around this year and they're going to be able to score? Because the efficiency was not there last year, but it's basically a brand new team, and he's got the tools, I think, to make this an offensive centric team.
Yeah, right. It was kind of weird to see that Arizona State has not been the offensive kind of program historically. Do I think it goes that way? It very well could be. Yeah, the more I think about it, it's like this team is, I think, going to tell us a lot the first 3 to 5 games of the year in terms of how they play. I don't see this being a slow paced, execution heavy team. There's some guys that play really good in space. And Warren Washington as a senior is going to beat just about any center rim to rim running the floor. So, it only kind of behooves them, I think, to speed up a little bit. We'll see. It's really hard to tell. Every coach in the offseason says we're going to speed up, but who knows?
Yeah, it's true. All right, let's move on to a really shitty team here. Cal.
Oh, God. Yeah, give me 30 seconds. I'm getting another beer before this one.
So Cal, 12-20 last year, 142nd at Ken Palm. Just a team that we never really get to, mainly because of the pace. 330th adjusted tempo at Ken Palm last year. Bart Torvik to start this season's got them at 134. So basically holding about the same as they were last year. They lose, I'd say, just key pieces from that team. 2 guys who got them to 12 wins. I think without Andre Kelly and Antisevich, it's an even worse team. They
Jordan
also
Shepard was the leading scorer. He's gone.
They also lose Jordan Shepard. So yeah, I mean, this is a thin roster. They add Devin Askew from Texas. What do you think overall about Cal here? There's not much to say, but what do you think?
Oh, yeah. When your entire team centers around Askew, you're kind of behind the eight ball, right? This team's in deep shit. Like when your best player who should have stayed, Andre Kelly, Shepard was gone anyway, but Kelly transferred to UC Santa Barbara, and for good reason. UCSB is going to be better than Cal this year. I mean, and so when it centers around Askew, when you got a guy in, Kawani, who we know we've had for the last 3 years, Celestine has been, whatever, a usable backcourt body. Same with Joel Brown. Thiemann is a weak Antisevich, and what do you get with this? There's the one piece, I guess, who could take a little bit of a leap forward is Sam Alajiki. He was, he shot 50% from three in a limited sample when Andre Kelly was injured down the stretch. As kind of a lengthy wing, so he could be decent and usable. But dude, this team is in bad shape. They got a guy in DeJuan Clayton who.
Was he like 35?
We joke a lot of times, right? This guy's in his 7th year of No, this man is literally in his 7th year of college basketball, okay? Sat out at Hartford last year. Previous 4-time All-MEAC guy at Coppin State, okay? But even in high volume, 28% from three, 40% field goal guy. I mean, and now he's taking a step up, so who knows what he's going to be. He's going to be a volume chucker, I guess. I don't know. This team's in deep trouble.
Yeah, I think, would you be shocked if we didn't use a Cal player the entire season?
Outside of, misprice or injuries or something like that, I would not mind, because they're going to be slow as shit too.
Yeah, so they're going to play slow. They're not going to score. They can't shoot. Not much interest here. They'll be battling Oregon State for the basement of this conference. Let's move on to Colorado. Interesting team last year. They finished 21-12 and 79th at KenPom. Torvik's got them 80th to start the year. Their tempo is about average 160th, but they've got some big losses, I think, starting with Jabari Walker, who we loved. Awesome player. They lose Evan Batty. Barthelomy's gone. And Eli Parquet's gone too. I think there's some really interesting players coming back here, though, Gavin, starting with Simpson and De Silva. What do you think?
Yeah, De Silva's getting a lot of pub. I honestly, I think more of it has to do with the fact that his last name is De Silva and his brother was a world beater a couple years ago at Stanford. More so than the fact that he's, a legit potential first-team all-conference guy. I got worries about KJ Simpson too. 2.7 assists a game to 2.2 turnovers, and he's supposed to be kind of the point guard of the team. So, he's going to have to be making a big step up. But, former top 100 guy, only shot 38% from the field. That gives you some worries. Simpson and De Silva, to me, feel like poor man's Krisa and Tubelis to an extent.
Yeah, I think Simpson can take a jump here. He does have to shoot it better, though. I think you mentioned 25% from three is just not going to cut it. I think he played he averaged just over 20 minutes a game last year. We think that will be in the high 20s here now as the starting point guard. He's going to be running this team basically. So yeah, I think Simpson's going to be good. I think he's going to be cheap. And I think we're going to be able to play him in certain spots, especially early before everything kind of corrects itself with new roles. So have a ton of interest in him. I'm on the same page as you with De Silva. I just don't think he's I don't think he's that good, and I do like doing this sheet that we do for the team research because Guys who are high fantasy point per minute just like stick out, and you can see breakouts coming. And there's nothing on De Silva's page that screams that he's going to take a 30-year jump. Any thoughts there? And then last thoughts on Colorado overall. I think this team just doesn't have that much depth.
Yeah, the depth is going to be an issue. You got a couple of bench warmer guys stepping into now kind of more depth roles in Julian Hammond and Luke O'Brien. What are they? Warm bodies at best. Nick Clifford's probably going to be the third option. I mean, he's all right. And then, Ethan Wright's going to have to continue to be a 40% three-point shooter, Princeton transfer, who, rebounded well in the Ivy where everybody is, 6'3" and below, and the centers are 6'5". So, yeah, we'll see. I think it's definitely going to be an uphill battle. I think De Silva is going to be one of the guys early on in DFS who people are going to play at what they feel is a bargain price compared to all the pub that they're hearing about him and how, good he can be. So, like if he's going to be a chalk guy, at something like 6,500 to 7K plus, then yeah, I could be into fading him early.
Yeah, I have much more interest in KJ Simpson personally from this team. Torvik's projecting Simpson for 26% usage. If that's the case, we are going to be playing some KJ Simpson. But let's move on to a better team, a more fun team. Oregon. Oregon goes 20-15 last year, 82nd at KenPom. Disappointing year for Altman there. Torvik's got him 37 to start the season. I think based on what's coming back and the makeup of this roster, I think that they can make a jump to get back in the top 40. What do you think about their losses and who they're bringing in?
Yeah, I think this might be a team that, at least it sounds like through the tea leaves, that did a little bit of addition by subtraction in terms of getting rid of some guys who sound like they might have been disgruntled. I don't want to name names, Davion Harmon, but last year was a weird year for Oregon. It was the lowest adjusted defensive efficiency in Dana Altman's history at Oregon at 115th. They were actually 114th in 2015. But in the last 10 years, he's had no other season outside the top 100. So it was just kind of a really weird year last year. It's going to be another odd-ish looking team in that you kind of have your set pieces in the backcourt in terms of two of Will Richardson, Jermaine Couisnard, South Carolina transfer, and Keyshawn Bartholomew, Colorado transfer. It's likely going to be Will Rich and then one of those two guys. Then you got the front court logjam of N'Faly Dante. You got Nate Biddle from last year, who didn't play a ton, but I think was a former top 150 guy and the one of the three bigs that can actually shoot from outside. And then you got Kalel Ware, friggin' top 10 recruit, who, from what it sounds like, is a little bit more of a pro prospect, one of these guys who's like, he's not going to be as stout and as physical as a Jalen Duren, but he's going to have a lot of similar body types or body comps in terms of length, twitchiness, stuff like that. So they're going to be lacking on the wings. What does Quincy Guerrier do when you have those three bigs? And is he going to play the four? Is he going to play the three? He took a step up shooting from three last year, which helped. So I definitely see Oregon taking a step forward, just considering how bad last year's team was. But I don't really know what the ceiling of this team is because, we kind of got, if Will Richardson isn't going to be a, all-American type talent, we kind of know what we have in him. I think the ceiling is going to be lacking on this team.
Yeah, I do like the addition of Couisnard. He was stuck on that South Carolina team where, he was trying to play 12 guys a game. So I think, if he ends up starting, I have interest in him. He's always been efficient for DFS when he's out there. And if he's going to see high 20s, I could see us using some Couisnard in daily fantasy. I think the front court, like you said, is going to be an issue, not for them as a team, but for us trying to use them for daily fantasy just because they have so many capable bodies and you're adding a top 10 guy. I just pulled up Ware, Gavin. He's 7 foot 205. So string bean out there.
Dude, but he's a guy that. So I think Oregon's going to have to play a lot of defense with these bigs, right?
Yeah.
You can literally play Ware out at the top of a 1-3-1. Like he's got that kind of athleticism, even for a 7-footer.
Yeah, and Torvik agrees. He's got Ware projected for 70% of the minutes. So guy to keep an eye on early, top 10 freshman recruit. But yeah, I think Richardson's going to be good. I think Guerrier is going to be good. I like Kuznard. So yeah, I mean, I like their starters. It'll be interesting to see how that front court kind of shakes out. This team loses Jacob Young, Harmon, Eric Williams is gone. But I think I like the roster better this year. I wasn't super high on Young and Harmon anyways. Any last thoughts on Oregon here?
No, don't think so.
All right, to your favorite team in the conference, Oregon State. When we were putting together their team tab, you kind of forget they went 3-28 last year, Gavin, 274th at Ken Pom, and look at where Bart Torvik's got them to start the year, 274th. This team doesn't play with much tempo. They lost everyone? Alajiki, Davis, Lucas, Silva, Maurice Kalu is also gone.
Yeah.
What is this?
Put it this way. They lost like 80 to 90% of statistical production from a team that went 3-28.
Yeah. What are you seeing here for Oregon State?
What am I seeing, huh? Wow.
This
is probably the worst Power 5 team in the last 20 years that we're going to see. This is going to be dreadful. Like, Oregon State doesn't have the ability to just, retool and re-recruit like a UCLA. So, they had their Elite Eight run off the backs of, the coach's kids the year after Trace left. But, the Ethan Thompson year, then they're really bad last year. Now they lose everybody. And it's kind of, I think they're bringing in, 4 or 5 frosh that I think they're just going to play. And however many games they lose is however many they lose. And Tinkle's just going to try and kind of build a culture and a foundation and try to take a step forward for next year. But I think this is such a bad team this year. So you can't even articulate how bad this team is.
Yeah, I think they're going to be worse than last year,
it's hard to see how they're better than last year.
Yeah, I mean, this team won 3 games last year, and I don't see how they're going to win. I mean, how does this team beat anyone? I think Glenn Taylor is going to be their usage leader. He's a sophomore, 6'6" wing. I mean, the entire starting lineup is gone from last year. So, I mean, I guess we might use them on, like a small slate or something, because all these guys are going to be free, especially to start the year, because they didn't play that much last season. But I mean, this team is just going to get pounded. The defense was awful last year. 349th in defensive 2-point percentage, Gavin. So I think is a team where we'll be targeting their opponents against Oregon State. Any last words here?
Yeah, the other thing about Oregon State too is now Wayne Tinkle's talking a lot about how he's going to have to speed these guys up, because there is no prayer where they are able to execute in the half court at all, like against, especially in conference. So you're almost going to have to kind of rely on some turnovers, some havoc on defense, getting you some easy buckets. The one piece that is kind of interesting is Glenn Taylor, sophomore, 6'6", I think starts probably at the 3. Most interesting tool set of the roster, with some height. He's got some peripheral upside. But, we'll see what kind of scoring acumen is in there. I don't know how much, but he should kind of be, the main, I think, focal point of the team of a bad team, none to say. But, he could be at least one bright spot if we got to say one nice thing about him.
Yeah, I think it's Taylor and Christian Wright, the Georgia transfer, as guys to keep the light on for, and we'll see how this team starts out. I don't anticipate having them on many slates Let's go to a team that you know well. Southern Cal, 26-8 last year, but 47th at Ken Palm. Pretty easy non-conference, if my memory is right. Torvik's got them 40th to start the year. This team loses Isaiah Mobley, so both of the Mobley brothers have come through and left. They also lose Ethan Anderson, Chavez Goodwin. But I kind of like this roster. It's super young, outside of Ellis and Peterson. What do you think about your squad's losses and who they're bringing in?
Yeah, it's kind of weird that I'm as down on them when I look at like their losses being Isaiah Mobley, like Chavez Goodwin. You know, Chavez was like 11-4 and 20-ish something minutes. Like he wasn't a world beater. Agbong Polo was not a world beater, and Ethan Anderson was a beer keg on legs. Like it's not like they're losing a ton outside of Isaiah Mobley and how good was he? I mean, 14-8, you know, looks good like on the surface, but man, I felt like he didn't even have that great as good of a year as he could have.
Yeah.
They bring in two main frosh. One is Iwuchukwu, who is supposed to be, you know, a lot more similar looking to Okongwu than he is to kind of the Mobley brothers in terms of being probably a little more defensive minded. Not really going to have much range, kind of outside, you know, a couple feet. And then another Kajani Wright who will play the 4. You know, it's basically inverted from a team that's been front court, you know, reliant independent to now being, you know, anchored by 2 guards. I mean, they were the number 2-point defense in 2021 with Evan Mobley. They were number 3 in 2022 with Isaiah and Chavez Goodwin. And now they got 2 frosh, you know, in the front court. So it's going to be really weird looking. Drew Peterson, like, are people really calling this guy first team fucking all conference, dude? Oh my God. I hope he is. I hope he is.
Yeah.
Just, man, that might be a little bit of a stretch. I think he's probably a little more of a second team guy personally, but Boogie Ellis had a pretty good year transferring in from Memphis, kind of given the point guard role reins, didn't have to fight for it. And then Reese Dixon Waters, I think, is probably the most interesting piece, you know, outside of anybody we've mentioned, as a guy who only played like 14 minutes, you know, a game last year, but definitely had some interesting stretches. He's actually like a potential NBA prospect, like a 3-and-D guy. 46% from 3 on more than 50 attempts is a pretty good sample size to feel good about his shooting going forward. So look for him to potentially make a pretty good jump for the team and probably start at small forward.
Yeah. When I was looking up the freshmen, did you see this story about Iwuchukwu having cardiac arrest during the summer during a practice?
Oh,
I don't know.
Here we go.
I don't know if, you know, how that's going to impact him to start the season, but yeah, just know that happened over the summer and keep tabs on that. Yeah, I agree with the Peterson take. I feel like people are putting him first team because he's like a safe pick, right? You know, like if you put him first team, he probably ends up on the second team. You're like, oh, you know, he made all conference, right?
Like, does he increase? Dude, 0.84 fantasy points per minute? That would have been higher than I would have thought that he was last year. I don't see him increasing that. I don't see him increasing 33 minutes a game. So it's like, how much more ceiling does this guy have in his 6th year that we haven't already seen in the first 5, you know?
Yeah, I think he is what he is. Same with Boogie Ellis too. I'm more interested, like you said, in Dixon Waters and like the Josh Morgans of the world. I think those guys are interesting, especially if they can push, you know, low 20s, mid 20s minutes. I think those guys are going to be interesting. Agree with you on Dixon Waters. I think they probably start Ellis, Peterson, Dixon Waters, and the 2 freshmen.
Yeah, with Morgan being the backup for either of the 2 Frost. So Josh Morgan I think he's a Long Beach State transfer, who didn't play a ton last year, but really long body. You know, interesting piece. I don't know, hasn't really shown a ton in any sort of decent sample, but he's going to have to be really integral. God forbid if Iwuchukwu was dealing with, you know, heart issues, he's even going to have to be more integral, if not a starter. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think where Torvik's got them is about where I would be in 40th. I think they'll hang, you know, outside the top 25, probably for the whole season. So, um, any last thoughts on your alma mater before we move on?
Nope.
All right, let's go to a team that I think we both are higher on than most. Stanford. Stanford 16-16 last year, 106 at Ken Palm. They went 8-12 in conference. They lose Jaden Delaire. That's pretty much all that they lost. And I think they brought in one of the most underrated transfers in the portal. What do you think about Michael Jones and the additions that Stanford made?
Yeah. I mean, literally one of the best shooters in the country, but without even, a shadow of a doubt. So, people remember Kellen Grady transferring from Davison to a Power Five, and it was certainly slow going, and the shooting was not, what it translated to. I don't know if I would really worry about that too much, but I think that Jones is going to be a great fit in this offense, especially because of kind of the point guard situation of this team, right? O'Connell, like I had serviceable last year. He started 30 of the 31 games, but like he shot like shit from three. He literally can't shoot. Turns over twice a game, so do you give Issa Silva a shot? I mean, oh God, like 14 minutes a game. You're asking a lot for him to step up as a point guard, even in a shared role. Harrison Ingram is going to, play some point forward type stuff. So, the two Jones, Michael Jones and Spencer Jones, I don't believe are related. That would be weird if they were, but no, the two Jones are two of the best outside shooters in the entire conference. So it's pretty interesting, at least how he fits on the team. He's the type of guy who'll fit on any roster. He's just a plug and play, legit 3-point shooter. So yeah, he's legit.
Yeah, I think this team fits together really well. I think Harrison Ingram is going to be awesome. He was quietly really good as a freshman last year. I believe he was like a top 30 guy. Played 31 minutes, average 10 and a half points, almost 7 boards, 0.81 fantasy points per minute. I think that ticks up. Love the talk about him playing some point forward, just adding another way for him to rack up fantasy points for us. I'm super high on him. I'm with you on both the Jones guys. I think that the point guard's going to be an issue. I assume they just like start O'Connell and he'll be fine, you know? So yeah, I mean, I like this team a lot. I know you do too. I think this is a good sleeper team for the conference. I think it's Arizona State and Stanford as far as teams, where we look up in late February and like, oh wow, they're in the top 4 of this conference.
And they were the two teams in the conference that I felt like have just been crazy snake bit the last 2 years. Remember even going back like 2 years ago with Stanford when like Dejon Davis was on the team and they would have like, 4 scholarship players for a game. It was just a joke. And now they're returning everybody pretty much other than a Jalen Delaire who only really he only gave more than 50% effort, maybe 50% of the time. So I'm not even worried about him being gone.
Yeah, I think this is a fun team. I think they'll play well. I'm excited to use especially Harrison Ingram in DFS. Any last thoughts here before we move on?
Yeah, you got kind of the front court rotation: James Keefe, Brandon Angel, and Maxine Reyno. Who with Ingram too? If they play Ingram at the 4, if they play him at a point forward 3. Those will be kind of the 3 pieces that, they all had kind of their spots where they were serviceable. Nobody's going to be a world beater by any means. Reyno actually had a pretty high fantasy point per minute, kind of one of those 7-foot Euro guys who at least has the ability to shoot from the outside. So we'll see.
Yeah, my last note would be they slowed down a lot last year. I think they ended up 252nd in tempo. I think that probably ticks up with more talent on the roster here. But that's just speculation. Let's move on to everyone's pick to win the conference. Rightly so, UCLA. Everyone loved them going into last year. Gavin and I were a little bit lower than the field on them going in. They end up 27-8, 11th at Ken Palm. Torvik's got them 9th to start this season. I personally like this roster better than last year. What do you think about the losses and who they're bringing in? They lose Juzang, Jules Bernard, who we loved, Cody Riley, Miles Johnson.
Yeah, without Juzang, you almost wonder if the offense moves better. With the ball moves better without him. So I'm not even sure that he was. Yeah, I'm not even sure that losing him is going to be that crazy or as impactful as I think a lot of people are going to believe it to be. You still have kind of the crutch of the team, and Tiger Campbell, obviously, senior point guard, as steady as it comes. Hawkes can be a legit threat for a first-team All-American, depending on how they want to, divvy up how the rosters go, if they want to put 14 guys or whatever. But that's really where the team's going to be centered around. Then you got to have the other two wings, Jalen Clark and David Singleton. Clark is much more of your on-the-ball wing defender who's going to be a lot more reliant on transition opportunities, on scoring on drives, on putbacks, versus Singleton's going to be your sharpshooter. Then you got the two big freshmen, Amari Bailey and Adam Bona. So, here's the issue I have with this team, okay? Tiger and Hawkes have both battled injuries throughout their careers, right? What happens if one of these guys misses any extended time in the conference?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this team is the most top-heavy of any team in the conference. I think that's a great point, right? Like who even plays point guard if Tiger goes down?
I guess Bailey, but
yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. Those two guys are going to carry this team, but like you said, if something happens, the team is very, very young behind them, right? They've got the two stud 5 stars coming in, Bailey and Bona, who I think are both going to start and be good. But yeah, I think that's a great point. I think they're in deep shit if Tiger's hurt, especially Tiger for any period of time. That's a great point.
Yeah, and Bona, we'll see what he's like on the defensive end. I mean, losing Cody Riley and Miles Johnson is that's losing 40 minutes of elite rim protection. So, we'll see what Bona does to pick up the slack, probably by himself, because they're really lacking interior rim protection. So yeah, that's I don't know if it's because I'm an SC alum and I just, hate this institution, but I'm almost thinking man, if we wanted to take some crazy gambles on someone on a conference favorite not to win their conference, UCLA is one injury away from Hawkes or Tigers. So it's something to think about at least.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. From everything I've heard, both of the freshmen are going to be really good, especially Bailey. But yeah, I mean, you're leaning on 2 guys and then 2 freshmen. I think that's a good point. I think that they could struggle a bit early out of the gate. I do think that the ceiling is there on the team just because of the talent that they're bringing in with the freshmen to combine with Tiger and Hawkes. I think the ceiling is high.
The freshmen fit perfectly with Tiger and Hawkes too.
Yeah, I think that the ceiling is higher than it was last year, but I think you're right about the floor, especially with, if anything happens. Any last words here before we move on to Utah?
Negative.
All right, Utah, 11-20 last year, but 122nd at Ken Palm. You don't normally see teams with a record like that in the top 150. They were 122nd. Torvik's got them 118th. So this team loses David Jenkins. They lose Riley Batten, and Booth Gotch is gone. He's not at Utah anymore, thank God. Did they bring anyone in, or was it just international guys? What are they adding here, Gavin?
Mike Saunders was a Cincy transfer and likely backs up Raleigh Worcester at point guard. But other than that, it's a lot of holdovers from last year.
Yeah, so this team centered around Brandon Carlson, super efficient guy. He was over 1 fantasy point a minute last season, which is something that we love to see, especially for big men. Averaged 26 minutes a game last year. Battled some injuries. Was it a foot? There was a couple weeks where he was questionable and out and
It
limited
was
and
two
stuff.
stretches where one was COVID and then it lingered, and then the other was an appendectomy that the
That's
recovery
right.
kind of lingered too. So he missed some good stretches of the year.
Yeah, I think so. If he has a clean bill, pushing 30 minutes a game with that efficiency, I think he's a guy that we can definitely look to play for DFS. Outside of Carlson, is there anything that you like on this team? Maybe some Raleigh Worcester or Marco Anthony or something?
You got to like Marco Anthony, following Craig Smith from Utah State, like power forward Swiss Army knife. Like Anthony and Carlson give you really good versatility because Carlson's a guy that can shoot from outside. Anthony, not as much, but Anthony's kind of a guy who you can put at the top of the key to run, a high post offense through out of the four. I think that Carlson has legit first team all conference upside if he can stay healthy for an entire year. His senior year, where he's going to be the go-to guy, unquestioned on the team. They got Lazar Stefanovic, maybe another. It almost seems like a Kirk Kriisa cousin, some YOLO Serbian chucker who he can shoot a little bit. He went for double digits 10 different times, 4 from 7, 4-7 from 3 for UCLA. 5-9 versus Oregon State, but he's also had his fair share of 0-7. So, we'll see what we get from him, and we know we have from Worcester, just kind of a steady returning starting point guard from last year. Better kind of DFS guy than just outright scorer, but I'll bet on Craig Smith. Last year was just kind of a really bad initial kind of first year for him. I think they can really only go up from here, frankly.
Yeah, I think this team's, he brought in some depth pieces that I think are going to help them throughout the season. Not guys that we're going to play in DFS, but adding, a Carlson and Saunders. It's just more depth for a team that their bench was really, really bad last season. I think that's a good point on Marco Anthony. I think he's just going to play a shitload of minutes, right? So he's going to be out there a ton, just racking up points. So I like him a good bit. Really like Brandon Carlson. You may have buried the lead a bit. We're doing our all conference teams later. I do like Carlson a ton. Any last thoughts here on Utah?
I don't think so. Last year felt like they were just kind of catching teams fortuitously, on the back end of that mountain road trip. But I think we'll see a much better performance from them this year.
Yeah, same. All right, let's go to Washington. 17-15 last year. They finished 110 at Ken Palm. Torvik's got them 84th to start the season. I think that they had an awesome offseason, especially in the transfer portal. So they lose Terrell Brown, who was he awesome last year, Gavin. Kind of out of nowhere.
What a wagon, dude. What a friggin' wagon last year.
At least in my eyes. I mean, were you expecting a Terrell Brown breakout like that?
No, Terrell, I couldn't believe that in mid-February, we were just blind locking him in every slate, and he was
9K.
laying 40, 50 bombs down every time.
He averaged 21.7 points a game last year. So they lose him. Massive, massive loss. Emmett Matthews, I believe, is back at West Virginia again.
Imagine.
Dejon Davis is gone. And thank God Nate Roberts is gone. I hated playing that guy. But they add some interesting pieces in the portal. What do you think about the losses and who they're bringing in?
Yeah, look, when you're going to lose Terrell Brown, your entire team is going to change looks. I mean, you're not going to have another guy, one, who can produce at that level on Washington, or two, who should even be trying to shoot at that volume or type of usage. But going into the portal, Noah Williams from Washington State, first one. He was a guy who kind of got a raw deal when Wazoo transferred in two guards in front of him last year, and he kind of got squeezed out a little bit with the other guys being more efficient, reliable veterans, I think, that work for Wazoo. So now he's going to have more, control of the offense as probably the lead point guard. He's not the most efficient guy ever, but we saw him, go bananas in Washington State a couple of times. Now, did he score 40 points on 35 shots? Maybe. But at least we can see that, he can kind of shoulder a load for a team. And, now he's going to be going into his senior year. Should expect a pretty good step up from him. And then Keon Brooks. How does he end up at Washington? I have no clue, but, the Kentucky kind of four-man who I think fits in really well for what Mike Hopkins wants to do here. He kind of got log jammed, at Kentucky. So should be, I imagine, the focal point of the offense along with, Noah Williams. He'll probably be the first look off the ball. So, yeah, two great pickups in the portal. And then Frank Kepning, big from Oregon, serviceable, not going to be anything outstanding, but good rim running, rim protector.
Yeah, I think this team's not going to be that good, but I'm excited for daily fantasy. We saw them really push the pace last year too. We hadn't mentioned that yet. 59th in tempo. So, I mean, I've always been a Noah Williams guy. I agree that he kind of just got lost in that Washington State rotation. I think he was probably a bit frustrated with what his role ended up being, you think? And kind of the same deal for Keon Brooks. And they both come in together, and I think they're going to be the two studs on this team. And I think we're going to be using both of them in DFS pretty often. I think that this team's going to run through them. I think they're going to play a shitload of minutes. I think they're going to take a ton of shots. We've seen Keon have good games as kind of, like the fourth or fifth option. I'm excited to see what he can do when he's the guy, right? I think he's got the ceiling in him. So super excited there. Outside of those two, I don't know where we're going to go for DFS. I think we can keep an eye on Kepning if he starts and they're giving him, low to mid 20s minutes. I think he could be interesting just because of the efficiency. But yeah, for me, it's Williams and Brooks, and really excited about both guys there. Any last thoughts?
Yeah, Jamal Bay comes back. He'll be the third option, 72 career starts, and actually the lead, I guess, the highest scorer remaining from last year. 2 steals and blocks per game. That's a phenomenal number for a guard. That kind of just stood out to me as like, holy shit, you almost never see that for anyone, and you almost only see it for centers. But yeah, pretty good 3-and-D guy. We'll see what we get from PJ Fuller. Will probably be like the first guard off the bench, but then you got Cole Byama, just a kind of gnarly sharpshooter who really don't do shit outside that.
Yeah, so I think this is an interesting team. Not in real life as far as wins, but I think that we will be playing some Keon Brooks and some Noah Williams this season. Let's go to our last team here. We got Washington State. Always a tilt fest with Washington State and their rotations, especially in the front court. If you thought it was bad last year, well, he's running it back. They go 22-15, but 54th at KenPom. Torvik's got them 54th to start the year. This team was really, really good defensively last year, Gavin. 28th at KenPom in his adjusted efficiency metric. They lose Michael Flowers. They lose Tyrell Roberts. They lose Noah Williams, who we just talked about. What do you think about the losses and the additions for Washington State? They bring in Powell, who we've seen throughout the SEC in his first 2 years.
Yeah. I mean, I can't believe you forgot F.A. Abagidi. How terrible.
Oh, F.A.
A guy had to pound the table for 2 years, and they finally started playing him at the back end of the second year, and he gets drafted. Weird.
He was good, man.
So, yeah, you're losing, obviously, a lot of backcourt production in addition to an NBA guy and FA. But Justin Powell, yeah, it's a good question with what we got from him. He showed some pretty gaudy stats in limited sample at Auburn. He also had like an O rating of 91 against Tier A competition. So a lot of it was beating up on the sisters of the poor in non-con. So, he got log jammed at Tennessee and should be the lead point guard here. And when TJ Bamba is your backcourt mate, they're going to be hoping that you're going to be the one doing more of the scoring because it ain't going to be TJ. So, yeah, Powell's really going to have to not only score, but he's going to have to shoot well from the outside just to give this team some spacing, as I don't know how much more outside scoring that, they're going to have outside those two guys and Jakimovsky.
Yeah, Powell is super interesting. Like you said, we saw him play really well before. Was it like a concussion that he got at Auburn where he was basically out the rest of the season after that?
Yeah, and they never definitively said if he was. They just said he was day to day and he was out for like 3 months.
Yeah, I think this is a cool spot for him, right? Because I think they're just going to give him the keys.
Yeah, 28th and 24th defensively the last 2 years for Wazoo. You don't typically associate that with Justin Powell, but we'll see.
Yeah. So 6'6" point guard. Torvik's got him projected for 81% of the minutes. If that's the case, we are going to be playing some Justin Powell. He's going to be cheap. He's a good shooter too. You've got here 44% at Auburn. So I think Powell is super interesting. And the other guy who we like, Mo Gee, is back after what I thought was just an awesome freshman season. Hoping that his minutes tick up. He averaged just a hair over 22 minutes a game last year, was super efficient within those minutes. I think if he pushes high 20s, he's going to be awesome. But they've got a lot of bodies in the front court. What do you think about that?
Yeah, they actually fit together relatively well, though. Jackson is going to be Deshaun Jackson and DJ Rodman are going to be more your defensive hustle guys, and then Mo Gee can play a little bit, not really on like the 3-point perimeter, but at least more than 3 feet away from the basket, like Jackson and Rodman can, and then Jakimovsky obviously can shoot from 3. So I kind of like how it fits together. The only thing is Mo Gee is just so much better than the other 3 guys. I mean, it's not even close. If they're not playing him 30-plus minutes, what the fuck are we doing? Like, I think we could definitely see a similar type jump that FA made where, he becomes an NBA guy really quick because some of the tools that he brings. I mean, yeah. I think he's the best defender in the conference, and I don't think it's really close, frankly. Just what he can do from a versatility standpoint, like maybe one of the only guys who can guard, potentially 1 through 5 in the conference. I mean, he's got that kind of foot speed, length, and athleticism. So we'll see. Yeah, I think he's a really interesting piece this year for Wazoo.
Yeah, love him. All right, so that's all the teams. We've hinted at some first team stuff, some breakout guys. So why don't we go right into it? Who is your Pac-12 first team?
Well, I think you got the 3 autos with Tiger, Will Rich, and Jaquez. Then I think it comes down to 3 to 4 guys. And I went with Tube, Azolas Tubelis, and I went with Harrison Ingram over Carlson.
I did too.
I went with Ingram, dude. Like I could see Ingram having an unreal year. Especially he's going to have another year to fill out his body, which will only make him more effective playing from the post. Like he's got more shooting around him than he's ever had, and Stanford's going to be better. I just really like the step that Ingram's going to make this year. So yeah, I think other than those 5, you're looking at Carlson, maybe Kerr Kriisa, or like a Drew Peterson.
Yeah, so I actually didn't have Peterson and I didn't have Richardson. I think that Richardson will likely be first team, but I wanted to get Brandon Carlson on there. So mine is Tiger, Jaquez, Ingram, Tubelis, and Carlson. I went for more ceiling guys than the tried and true safe picks. I think that guys like Richardson and Peterson have awesome floors, but I think, guys like Ingram and Carlson, given the situations and good health, I think could have really good seasons. What about some breakout guys? We've touched on.
I think there's two guys that you can choose in this conversation.
For breakout guys, I only listed three for the entire
I'll let you
conference.
Go first, and then I'll pick the other one I have.
Yeah, so we just talked about him, Mo Gee. I think a clear breakout guy. I'm not sure if he qualifies as. All right, so he only averaged 7.5 points a game. So yeah, I think that he can qualify. I think, like you said, if they play him 30 minutes a game, I think this guy gets drafted.
You might get drafted with less than 30 minutes a game because Team C is tools. I'm telling you.
Yeah, so he's my number one breakout guy. I think that he is like the top tier, and then there's a gap. Who else did you have?
Oumar Ballo season, baby.
Me too. I got him.
I think those are the two main guys that it came down to for me. Like I said, he's not Koloko. He's not what Koloko was for them last year. He's going to be much more the Sonogo, where he's just going to physically brute his way to 13-9 as long as he stays out of foul trouble. Most games that he gets 22 to 27 minutes in. You don't need to take Tubelis. You don't need to take him off the floor to play Tubelis and vice versa. They fit really well together. So I love Ballo for this season.
Yeah, we saw him just absolutely smash even off the bench last year in minimal playing time. I think he's a red star. Circle him. We're going to jam him early, Gavin. I had two other guys that I had written down that are in a tier below those two. I had KJ Simpson, just because, they're handing the keys over to him, sophomore season, point guard. I think he should make the list. And then I put Reese Dixon Waters from USC.
Okay, not sure I will accept that.
I'm not sure if he's going to get the usage to, fully break out on a team. But, yeah, so those are the four guys I listed. You want to touch on who you think are going to be like the highest impact transfers before we get out of here?
Yeah, I think it's another two-man discussion. And so do you want to pick Keon Brooks or do you want to pick Justin Powell?
Keon Brooks was number one on my list, but Powell so I listed five guys and Powell is on my list. I got Brooks. I got Frankie Collins at Arizona State. I think he's going to step in and be the point guard from day one. We liked what he did at Michigan last year. I think he starts off the year pretty cheap. I think we'll be playing him. And then Desmond Cambridge, I also listed. So Arizona State, two of my four guys that I have on here. Anyone else?
No, I mean, yeah, I didn't list them because I think they're going to cannibalize each other to a certain extent. But I don't have any issues with either of those guys.
Yeah, so awesome. So our first conference is done, the Pac-12. We've got 4 weeks until the games start.
29 days.
29 days. We're within a month. We've got our Champions Classic tickets purchased. We will be at those games in Indy. I believe it's November 15th. Two awesome matchups in the first couple weeks of the season. Check us out. We will be doing one of these for each of the major 6 conferences. We're doing Big 12 next. So make sure to take a look at that. We're going to be doing the same setup. So, we're do some storylines, go through the rosters, breakout guys are all first team, stuff like that. So we will be back with the Big 12 video a little bit later. See ya.